Dana White successfully pulled off the UFC 249 event in Jacksonville, Florida, and that is a real kick to the nuts for the shut it down forever crowd in the sports world. Now, there was no live gate, so nobody was paying to be there. There was zero fans in attendance, obviously. It was a TV-only spectacle made for television, and as a result of this, Dana White has all of a sudden become the face of the return of sports in the United States. And he had a ton of interesting things to say, and I would like to, as Warner Wolf would say, go to the audio tape and then react to the many statements that Dana White had in this recent interview he did over the weekend from Florida. And he answered a lot of the questions that we have. He gave a version of the answer. So let's listen. Here's Dana White asked about when fans can return. When will the fans be allowed back?
I just think it's going to depend on how fast testing, the technology gets there. The president was telling me about this thing that you lick and it tells you whether you have it or you don't. I mean, if we start getting tests like that, yeah, we could probably have fans a lot sooner.
Who doesn't want a lick test? So there's that. There's that possibility. Here is more from Dana White, who says that he is not worried about the fear mongering. And there's a lot of that. We'll get more to it later on in these clips from Dana White. But here's Dana White talking about the people that are upset that the UFC is back.
Nothing anybody says bothers me. I literally care what anybody thinks. Nobody who's associated with this event had to come. Fighters don't have to fight. My employees haven't had to. Everybody that's here wants to be here.
Yeah, all right, so everyone's on their own free will there. And he also pointed out, Dana White, that the other sports leagues are knocking on his door right now.
Somebody asked me this a few days ago, and at that time nobody had. But yeah, other sports organizations are reaching out and asking for, so are other states. Other states have too.
All right, so this next one I think is pretty important. So Dana White talked about the big issue is, oh my God, the dangers, stranger danger, right? People are freaking out. These athletes can't be forced to go out there and compete. How dare you? And of course, no one's being forced to go out there and compete. But Dana White addressed this, the mitigation of risk. I think is the most important of these soundbites.
How do you keep these guys as safe as you possibly can with this crazy that's going on? And nothing is 100%, nothing is guaranteed, and we need them to do their part too. They got a list of guidelines that they need to follow while they're here this week too. So if everybody does their part, you eliminate a ton of the risk. You can never eliminate 100% of risk. It's impossible to do in life, period.
Yeah, that's the key part. You cannot mitigate 100% of the risk, and people seem to think, oh, no, you can do that. You can't allow this to go on. All right, here's more from Dana White, the boss of the UFC, who really laid in to the complaints of the media, the very angry, woke media.
This thing with the media that was going on, what is wrong with continuing to do what you do if you can do it safely? And I just never understood, why don't we figure out solutions to these problems? And guys, I got a really nice house, great house. I've had, the time that I've spent in my house, I've had a blast. My kids are home. It's been a great couple of months, to be honest with you. And I could just stay home and do this too. But why? Why do we have to do that if we can honestly figure out how to do this safely? Why?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense there, and kind of a douchebag the way he talked about his house, but I'm sure he has a much better house than I have and a much better house than you have. All right, here's more. We're listening to Dana White here. These are comments he made recently about the return of the UFC. This is another one that I enjoyed here because I've been dealing with a lot of this with my colleagues in the sports media as well. They get into these text conversations with these yahoos, and it's the fact that many people in the media have now turned to shaming Dana White and the UFC for coming back.
If you come out and you say you want to figure it out and you want to do it, it's like some of these guys out there almost, it's like you were saying, that was being said about me. It's almost like, they try to terrorize you and shame you into, and there would be media members that if I came out and gave any information, they would just start hammering the athletic commission or the hotel or the venue that we were going to with all this, it was a pretty crazy time. It really made me dislike the media, big time.
Yeah. All right. Here's more from Dana White, the last one here, and then we'll get into the meat of the Maller monologue. Here is Dana White pointing out that the media, again, he doubles down on this, that the UFC media was attempting to undermine the return of sports and his sports league. Listen to this.
100%. 100%. Literally, media calling, hammering these guys. How can you let this event happen? Media who cover this sport. And I'm like, wait till they start getting laid off, right? If I can pull this off safely and everybody can still work, you guys can still have a sport to cover and you know. So let me tell you what, when these media companies, right, you got the guys who cover the NFL, you got the guys that cover Major League Baseball, you got the guys that cover the NBA, you got the guys that cover MMA. Who do you think's going first? I promise you it's not the NFL guys, okay? I'm trying to get this thing going and put on fights, and the guys who are supposed to be covering this sport are calling and hammering the athletic commissions and the venues, and I can't wrap my brain around that one.
Yeah, it's outrageous. All right, so let us discuss the question. What do you make here? You heard the Dana White comments. We played a lot of them. I thought they were all good, very colorful Dana White. He's a great soundbite in an interview. Now, I loved him. All right, so I've got the choir, the template, and omegas. And we will lock all of this together. Now, number one. Dana White summed up exactly many of the thoughts that I have had here on this particular issue that's been going on. The mainstream media, and I'm dealing with the sports media here, have been pushing back now against any return in the sports world and in many ways commerce in general, acting like playground snitches, trying to shame, in this case, the UFC. It's almost like they want to see everything completely shut down, some of these people, till 2022, which is pathetic. It's unnecessary. They are vermin, the people that are in that camp. And listen, I hope you heard those sound bites. Listen closely to what Dana White had to say. In my case, he was preaching to the choir for me, because I'm on that side. The UFC has now become a symbol of hope. I'm not a big UFC fan at all, but we have been waiting now for over 2 months, needing someone to put their big boy pants on and have the courage to step forward. Right? There's no perfect plan. We've talked about this. There's nothing foolproof. There are going to be risks. That nothing's going to please everyone, but you got to do it. You just got to act. And Dana White did it. He sat in the big chair, and the other commissioners, Rob Manfred, Adam Silver, Gary Bettman, look like the Three Stooges in comparison. It's all talk, no action. All talk. Let's have a conference call. Let's have another damn conference call. Nothing gets done. Meeting after meeting. Everyone's afraid to pull the trigger. Well, Dana White isn't afraid to pull the trigger. He pulled the trigger, and guess what? It worked. Now, the second thing here, Dana White, we can say he's the sports hero that we need, but not the one that we deserve, right? Because if we listen to these other commissioners, we'll go another 3 months without having any sporting activity. There is nothing you can do that is 100%, as Dana White said. And, listen, I know there's a lot of people, oh, my God, you got to avoid all germs. Germs are the devil. Listen, they're part of life, all right? You're going to have to deal with it. Now, obviously, nobody's going to run out of their way and say, oh, my God, I got to, wrap myself around someone that has the coronavirus right now. But I'm sorry, if you're a germaphobe, the germs are not the devil. They're not. I mean, God forbid we all become Howie Mandel here. But Dana White, what he did was lay out the template. He laid out the template even before the wrestlers, the fighters, the combat guys, checked into the hotel. Every single fighter, every corner person, coach, camera people, the reporters, the UFC employees, when they arrived in Jacksonville, Florida, they were immediately directed to a screening station, and they were swabbed. Not the Schwab, they were swabbed. And the effort, obviously, to mitigate risk. You can't make things 100%, as Dana White said. There was a fighter who did test positive for the coronavirus last week before the event. And a couple of his corner guys also tested positive, and they were sent away. They were sent to quarantine. They were asymptomatic. They didn't have any signs of the illness, but they tested positive for it. The show went on as planned. Now, keep in mind, this to me is the most important part of this entire episode with the UFC, because we've been hearing whispers from the NBA and the NHL and the other sports leagues that should one of the players test positive, which is a guarantee when sports come back, players will continue to test positive for the coronavirus sporadically. There's no 100% plan. Then these leagues would shut down for 14 days. The entire operation would shut down if they test positive. Now, that is absurd. The UFC did it the right way. You treat the player that tests positive as an injured player because for the vast majority, it is like the flu for the vast majority of people. The train keeps moving down the tracks. Now, the final point here. This was a tremendous win for the UFC coming back. And on this show, we have had to deal with all kinds of nincompoops, cowering and afraid nitwits that have been overwhelming us, not so much lately, but early on. Mr. Nice Guy in the Bay Area who said sports are not coming back this year. That gutless puke, Angry Bill, who happens to be in Jacksonville, one of our regulars who hasn't called in a while, wonder why. He claimed they're never coming back, and we were all losing our jobs, those of us that worked in sports media. So, listen, I know there's a lot of people infected with that defeatist attitude, bunch of pushovers, but Dana White proved these dopes wrong, right? You adjust to your environment, and so I say bravo to Dana White. This was an alpha move. You got a lot of these people that are omegas in sports. That's an alpha move by Dana White. It seems to me that a lot of people are being very comfortable right now with the shutdown. And, listen, I am not. I'm not comfortable with this. I read that a lot of people now are making more from unemployment than they did while they had jobs. That if you worked in the restaurant industry, that you had to go on unemployment, and you're making more right now from that than you would have if you had been working at the bar or the restaurant. So there's no sense of urgency for a certain percentage of people to come back, and you're going to have to say, well, there's got to wait till a vaccine. I hear that a lot. Well, what if there's never a vaccine? Do we just write off all of sports forever and say that's it? And listen, if players don't feel comfortable, you can either choose to participate or not participate. There are consequences for one's actions in life, and if you choose that you don't want to participate, then you don't get that big fat contract and you can go get a job somewhere else. That's the way it works. That's how it works in the real world. So I love Dana White. It was great. And we need more people like Dana White to just stop with the BS and stop with the conference calls and stop with the email chains and just make a decision and do it. Okay? Just go forward. Nothing's perfect, and that's the way it's got to be.